So we became Kinship caregivers in 2005, I believe. Our grandson would have been 2.5. His mom called me up and said, "Will you please take Tristan?" I said, "Take him where?" But she meant take him. We had a really good relationship with the birth mom. She lived with us. She was like our daughter. And so it was a really nice, smooth transition for Tristan. So 2.5, he came into our care.
But he was basically in our life the whole time. It was a case of our birth son, who's now 43, struggles with addiction, drug and alcohol, still does, unfortunately. The birth mom turned 17 in October, and Tristan was born in December. So very young mom. But we were there from the beginning, honestly. I was in the room in the hospital helping tummy mummy with her breathing while she was giving birth. And so we've kind of been in his life his whole life.
Surprisingly, Kelly is the birth mom, or Kate, should probably say. We co-parented. So it was her and I through the pregnancy, her and I through the infant stage, help her with nursing and things like that. And people kept saying, "Is this your mom? Is this your mom?" And finally, she just looked at me and said, "Can I just tell them you're my mom?" And I said, "Sure." So it was a very smooth transition from her care to ours.
Yeah, well, and also so how we came into our care. As I said, Mommy asked Mandy, like, "Can you take him?" And it's like, "Take him where?" And she said, "No, I need you to take him." Because I guess when you're a young person and you're 19 and your friends are dating and doing different things, having a 2-year-old is difficult. And we said, he's not a puppy. And like, so if we do take him, this is going to be, obviously you'll have access to him whenever you like, but this is going to be a permanent thing.
And then the challenges. So if I knew that Tristan was alcohol affected, I knew that his mom had drunk and done drugs, whatever our son gave to her, because he was 22 in legal age for drinking. But I wasn't expecting him to have a heart disease, a heart repair, which came at 5, and a lot of health problems and a lot of special needs. He started with FASD. He was diagnosed bipolar at 3.5, then FASD, then anxiety, sensory processing issues, and then finally, after a 2-year wait, he was diagnosed as autistic. So we had quite a mixed bag of special needs to work with.
We also found out afterwards that a bipolar diagnosis for any child under the age of 5 is basically unheard of.
And his dad is bipolar, so it was a good guess, but we threw it to the side because it freaked out the kindergarten teacher, so we threw it away and just kept with the lane we were moving in. There were so many challenges. The advocacy part of trying to get his needs met fell on me because I was lucky. I was a trained advocate. I'd worked for the Boys and Girls Club for 10 years. And I had many days where I ended up in tears because I just had made so many phone calls. I hadn't even got out of my pajamas yet, trying to find the right fits for this little guy. And we didn't get really any assistance from MCFD. When he was diagnosed autistic, then he gets a social worker because he's autistic. The social worker wasn't very nice, to be honest, and was so unprofessional in a meeting that she fired herself. So we went to a few social workers, and I wasn't a problem parent or anything. They're not very nurturing, empathetic, and compassionate, and that's what I really am looking for in that kind of a person. We didn't see that.
And what we found throughout those years, well, basically, probably like your situation, Gail, I worked most of the time and I worked long hours for a private company, and most of it fell on Mandy. And we found out that basically the MCFD policy is just say no. And you ask again and they just say no. And you have to be, as you know, and most of us know, you have to be persistent and relentless. Took a lot out of Mandy. And when we look back on that, I mean, we're fortunate to sort of be like a middle-class family who has access to a cell phone and a computer and all these kind of things, and to have the support of each other. The people that are trying to, no wonder they can't navigate this. It's virtually set up to be impossible.
Yeah. And nobody tells you what's available, and then you don't know what questions to ask. And every once in a while, you surprisingly ask the right question and something lands in your lap. But time passed, and I quit my job at Boys and Girls Club when I found out about his heart needing repair. We were 3 weeks and $3,500 in Vancouver at Children's while he had his heart repaired. He was only 32 pounds when he was 5 because he had no circulation below his waist. And to get a sensory avoider through a big surgery like that, I basically lived in the hospital. So and then we just continued on having different hospitalizations. He couldn't swallow any liquid medicine. So when he got tonsillitis, he's in the hospital, IV meds. So all of this led to pretty big collapse for me. I already have a chronic health problem and I was getting older and it was constant distress. And you always had to be ready because you never knew what he was going to do. So time passed and he got very big. Very big and a lot bigger than me. And of course, being autistic has these autistic meltdowns that are quite epic. He'd say, "Mama, sometimes my brain tells me to run." And towards the end of having him in our care, so he would have been 17, we were having to call the RCMP because he would run, no shoes, no jacket. Well, so he's a danger to people because he's in an angry escalation, but he's also incredibly vulnerable.
So the advice we were given is if he escalates like that, the advice Mandy was given, because I was always at work, go and lock yourself in your room to keep yourself safe. And she said, I am not going to go and lock myself in my room when he may run from the home, or when he's escalating, he might be pounding his head on the floor. So what I'm going to do is not touch him and put a blanket or a pillow under his head, right? And to put it into perspective, this 32-pound child when he was 5, I'm about 5'10" and 185. He was about 6 feet and 215 at this point. So what ended up happening was I had to leave work because there's no way Mandy could be at home dealing with that and keep both of them safe.
And I was quite mentally ill, like very mentally ill by then.
Burned out.
Constant stress. I was diagnosed with PTSD and I just couldn't do it on my own. So we had 2 choices. We put him into foster care, which frankly, all the professionals were telling us to do, or we created 2-on-1. And this is a child that needs unconditional love. You're not going to get unconditional love in a foster home. And he's pretty miserable sometimes, you know? So we knew we had to keep him in our care. We know the kids in kinship care do better.
So for 18 years, we got $400 and change a month for looking after Tristan. At this point, I had to retire at 62. I worked for a local independent company, totally not financially prepared for that or emotionally. So we went to MCFD. So I retired. So I'm at work on Monday and I go and speak to the owner of the company. And I was kind of second in command and said, family comes first. I got to do this. And he said, okay, well, I'll give you a few weeks to figure it out. And I left on a Monday and I never went back. And I'd worked there for 25 years.
Yeah, we had never gone to MCFD for anything, or respite maybe.
Yeah.
We'd ask for respite. And so we went to speak with MCFD. We had the representative for child and youth there. We had Tristan's teacher. We had a ton of Tristan's young caregivers there. And they looked us in the eye and they said, we will happily take Tristan and put him into a foster family for it's around $3,500 a month because he's a very high needs child. But we don't pay parents to raise the children.
So Mandy left the room in tears, which I didn't often see, but she'd had enough. And I go, you know something? You guys are all about protecting the bottom line. And that's just bad math. Can't you do something to help us? And they said no. But what we did find out a little while later, and you can mention, we got a new social worker and they came up with something different after the fact.
They dragged their feet. We started this in the spring. And around August, they said, you know what? We could give you the EFP, which would change our income from $400 to $1,500.
No, I should say we were on child in home of relative prior to that. So they said, there's a EFP program available. And we're like, there is?
First we're hearing. So we had to jump through hoops, became a foster family, ticking all those boxes. And they gave us the EFP. And 2 months later, our grandson aged out.
You think they didn't know that?
that in the spring.
Yeah.
So that was when I decided that I am not going to stop fighting for this, even though our child is aged out completely out of anything. And we're no longer full-time kinship caregivers. He's living in a home share. I will not leave this ugly legacy for people that come behind me. And so I will be here until they drag me out and put me in the ground.
And that's why we joined Fairness. And we get a whole lot out of this as well. And getting back to Tristan, so now he's in his autistic FAST brain. When you're 18 years old, you do not live at home anymore, regardless of whether they're parents or grandparents or what. So he was in a home share for about 3 years, and then that kind of didn't work out. So he was in another one for about 3 weeks, and he didn't want to go back to that so badly that he chose to sleep outside, leaning against the bike rack in McDonald's. And he said he woke up and he didn't know what time it was, but it was light out and there was a big dog licking him in the face. So he got a little taste of homeless. And just as of a week ago, we moved him into a new home share with somebody who is like an outreach worker, and he has a roommate, and fingers crossed, but right now everything's clicking beautifully. And for Tristan, life is good.
When he's not escalated, he is the sweetest, kindest, affectionate little boy. Even though he's not little, he's still a little boy inside.
When you see him with animals and young children, much like his father, it's beautiful. The other thing that we found is for our own relationship, I think when you face life challenges like this, one of two things happen. It brings you closer together, or it tears you apart. For us, it's brought us closer together. I've had to come into, I'm the guy now. So ever since I retired, I'm the guy that Tristan phones. Mama did that for enough years, right? And so I'm the guy who talks to him every day. Last night I was out in the car talking to him. I'm the guy he phones when he needs to be talked off the ledge. But our relationship is also with Tristan has come full circle. And he and Mandy are so close that if he hammers his finger right now at home in Victoria, it's going to be her fault. And it's been one of those. And it was
He also wants
right.
you to fix it.
Yeah.
Come to me to get it set.
Yeah.
He looked at me the other day, and I waited a really long time to hear this from a male child. And he said, Mama, I will never let anything bad happen to you. And even though it's not neurotypical, that still meant a lot to me.
And he always says to me now, I phoned him last night, and he knows that Mama goes to bed early, and he says, and I haven't done this yet, he says, make sure when you see Mom tomorrow morning, you tell her that I love her. We did not hear that for many, many, many years.
We heard it a lot in the beginning that he wouldn't separate from me, but at some point it was really, really ugly. And it was just see his brain continuing to develop, which is also good news. I thought he was done, but no, he's still developing and growing. So that's also a success.